You can save her. I sink ever deeper in a sea of nothing that hurts. You can save everyone you care about. Sleep is quiet, persistent agony. All it would cost is everyone you don't. If I sleep at all, that is. Sometimes it's hard to tell the difference between dreams and the insistent whispers flooding my soul. That is all it is to live. To stumble through a nightmare, begging your own mind to release you into the waking world, only to realize that you were never asleep at all. Memories crash down like the weight of the ocean. Dreams of paralysis, of drowning in nothing at all, of being torn apart layer by layer and left exposed to the frozen wind between the stars. When the echoes in my head fade, I'm sitting in a black field of black flowers beneath a sunless sky, in which clouds composed entirely of tiny stars shimmer and shift. At my feet, the dark grass gives way to a thin shore of obsidian sand before a vast ink-black sea. Its surface is still, partially frozen over into thin, cracking sheets of ice that reflect the stars like window glass. Far away, seeming to float on the water's surface, there's a single ring-shaped structure, its spiny, porous walls like white coral gleaming in the faint starlight. And a living shadow rests by my side, peering at me with two star-speckled violet irises like ring nebulae. Eulasri, she called herself, though not in the way harbingers scream their truths into the world. Her soul is silenced, as hidden as the face behind her umbral veil. See if she has a face at all. I wonder if that's an act of mercy. I've seen her before. Heard her before. Felt what she can do. I just haven't thought about her at all since then, and I have no idea why. All I know is that here, in my own head, I'm helpless as I've ever been. The shadow shakes her head. Her tangled hair drifts in a messy fan behind her, floating as if it's underwater. Rest easy. I have already seen inside your shell. I wince, doing my best to shove those memories away. No matter what she says, just trying to talk to her feels like asking the sun why it rips our souls out through our eyes. But the world around us is silent, still, tranquil, and she only waits and watches. Whatever she's come back for, this won't end until she's done it. Then why are you here? To commiserate. Eulasri gestures with her eyes out at the Black Sea. I can't tell what she's pointing me to, at first. There's only ice and darkness and that strange coral-carved building. But in time, shapes and splotches of dull color come into view. Human shapes. Preserved corpses, far too many to count, half frozen into the surface of the sea. I can't retch. My stomach doesn't churn. I feel like I should, but that's something bodies do, and in this place, there's only me. All I feel is a familiar heavy, creeping dread when I recognize Shona among them. See, her body is face up near the shore, frozen in a rictus of agony, her keeper outfit dark and waterlogged. The weight grows and grows as my eyes pan over the dead, a spectacle too awful to look away from. Maid is among them, too. And Ashling, and Nyav, and Noirin, and Dad and Grain and Mom and everyone I've ever known, and even once I've ran out of faces I could possibly recognize, I can't help but imagine every single icy corpse as someone precious to me and gone forever. I have lost more dear ones than you have met. The pain never dulls. Not ever. Certainly not for those of us who know what becomes of them. Cold certainty stabs into me, confirming what I already knew. No, the dead but suffering souls trapped inside me have nothing to do with me or my power. For beings like them, see, and like Shona, I can only imagine, and certainly like me, judging by the way my own power keeps screaming at me that my body and my life are mere inconveniences. See, death is just something worse than even I could have imagined. It's not just me, is it? It's part of magic. Some aspect of having power and needing to eat souls to grow. Eulasri's eyes flicker, seeming to blink rapidly, but only for a fraction of a second before they stabilize. You stare in horror at reflections on the surface of the sea, blind to the depths of the abyss. If you dove in, it would swallow you whole. I stare back at her, uncomprehending and hating myself for it. It's one thing to be told you're a stupid child who doesn't understand anything, and another entirely when you know the person saying it is right. This whole idea is a nightmare I stumbled into by accident right before bed. I have no idea how it really works or why it's this way. Your language is ill-suited to conceptualize such things. Yulasri handles the word language the way she might a slimy piece of trash, holding it at a distance between two fingers. Let alone convey them. You are grasping at ideas you lack the words to even think. But still you grasp. There is dignity in that, I suppose. Then say it in yours. You know I understand it, so if you're here to talk about this, say it so I can understand. She picks a single onyx flower, stares at it for a moment, then releases it to drift into the sea on an unfelt breeze. It is not my wish to smash you into 1,000 eggshell splinters. What does that even dash? I freeze. The answer to my own question bubbles up from my mind. Drown yourself in my light and I will show you everything. The sun spoke to me just last week. Maybe there are things no one should know. Things we can't understand and stay ourselves. Never mind. I think I get it. Say what you can without doing that thing. Please. A thin, joyless outline of a smile crawls across Yulasri's shadowed face, a faintly curved crescent of amethyst light. You do see into the shallows, then. I will tell you this, your fear, if it is a thing you fear, is correct. I have no need to show you what you can already sense. This sepulchre is only a sketch of the truth, and a rather idyllic one. But your view of it all is woefully incomplete. Her bitter expression dissolves back into darkness, leaving only her wide, unblinking eyes. How lucky the dead would be, if only there were any of them. There is no world beyond for the dead. No silent respite of oblivion. Only transformation, twisting and tearing and torment without end. Always. Forever. For everyone and everything. What? I choke out, the word dry as sand in my mouth. That strange smile blinks into being for another instant, but there's a jaggedness to it, like a child's imperfectly drawn outline of the original shape. You described it well enough, given your limitations. Only one false impression led you astray. You think through the scope of your own experiences, and the true scale of all this escapes you. That can't be, I croak. Yulasri's starlit eyes narrow, giving the impression of a mouthless scowl. If you understood the language of the stars, you would know what an absurd thing it is to accuse me of being a liar. Listen to my echoes, really listen, and you will know that all I have said is true. I know that. The way harbingers speak isn't just speech. It's opening their soul up and exposing a part of themselves to me. Hearing it is enough to be certain that whatever they say is the absolute truth as they see it. They couldn't spew lies any more than I could tear my ribcage open and pluck an apple from the tree I have growing where my heart should be. But they're harbingers. That doesn't mean what they believe is real. They've told me things that couldn't be real, no matter how abstractly I think about them. Haven't they? The more I rack my mind, the less certain I am. So if what she's saying is true, or some kind of true, what would that mean? Is everyone a harbinger eats still inside them? What about everyone who was inside a harbinger I ate? Could I reach Mr. Enfield through your phone, or pluck him out of it and bring him back to life the way I'm hoping to do with Shona? I try to reach out for my victims, to feel them and search for any traces of their victims, but I don't know how to target or talk to or interact with them, and their voices are quiet here. Like they're hiding in the corners of my soul to escape Yulasri's notice. I don't know how to check for little tortured people layered deep in the nesting doll of my soul, but I do know souls can be absorbed and still exist. It could happen to normal people's souls, too. It's not nearly as ridiculous a thought as I desperately need it to be. And everyone who lives an ordinary life and dies an ordinary death. What happens to them? Where do they go? There are no such souls, Yulasri says, coldly and with absolute confidence. The nature of this world is repulsively abnormal artifice to begin with. I can't get lost in imagining what that might mean. Not now. I dig my fingers into the grass, clutching stray blades tightly enough to rip them out. Then what are we even supposed to say about any of this? Everything is terrible and it always will be. Is that all? It is. So few of you notice what is right in front of you. But no, that is not all. Yulasri glances back out at the sea. She watches as a sheet of ice silently cracks, sending the bodies splayed across and through it bobbing off into the distance. I can end their pain. If it is your wish for them, I will grant your captives the peace the world denies them. I've barely processed her words when the voices emerge from their hiding places, speaking all at once in a chaotic storm of sentiment. Fear and shock slowly resolve into three distinct impressions: Sariana's dull apathy, Olanla's sharp, spiteful insistence that I have no right to wish anything for it, and from Yerfilm, still the loudest and clearest of the crowd. No, 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 please, no, you can't, she can't. How? I ask in a barely voiced whisper. Why? Yulasri bows her head and puts a hand to her chest. Loss. Grief. Keenly felt absences. These things shape me, as the struggle to live in unlivable conditions shapes you. I have searched and searched for an exit to this labyrinth, as you do for a way to persist inside it forever, and when I could not find one, I tore it open myself. A cold and gentle absence at the bottom of everything, for those who can bear this no longer. She makes a single sweeping gesture over the colorless field and the star-clouded sky and the corpse-ridden ocean. It is a small thing. Hardly a solution. But it is the nearest thing in the cosmos to a true escape, for now, there's a sense of quiet triumph in her voice, as if she'd accomplished something too beautiful to truly express. What she's describing is nothing more than the fate I always believed was waiting for me and everyone else. If I take her at her word, she's claiming to have invented death. Her eyes flit between the frozen corpses on the water. I wonder what she sees there, somehow certain that we aren't looking at the same thing. Where I see the faces of everyone I've ever known, she must be staring out at her own tortured wasteland of lost friends. How choked with corpses is her ocean? How much pain has she carried, for how long, to bring her to the point of celebrating my greatest fear? I won't go, never, not ever, this is where I belong, Yerfilm babbles desperately. I don't know how to answer it. I don't know what I'd say if I did. And what would that mean for us? Those you carry with you would vanish from all but memory. I cannot erase them entirely, something nobody ever knew was there cannot be lost. As for you, you would be less than you are now, I suspect. But more yourself. Less how? I need to be less myself to live. That depends on you. On precisely how much they have changed you. Right, I mutter. Not a good sign. I don't want to carry these monsters around forever. It's not even just for my own comfort. I don't want Yerfilm or Irakia or Sariana free to follow their whims, but I don't want their conscious remains to be ripped apart and tortured forever. Nothing deserves that. It's horrible beyond comprehension that this is the way things work. Still, despite everything they are, everything they did, the idea that they could have lived for nothing, died for nothing, and been thrown into the void for nothing feels too sad. I know Alunla deserves better. I'd give it better, if there was any way I could. It didn't do anything I wouldn't do, if I had to kill to save my life. No, I finally say. Thank you, I think. But I don't think I can do that to them. Not while there might be, I don't know, something else for them. Somewhere. My harbingers pull back into the edges of my awareness, save for Yerfilm. I feel its gratitude like a warm meal in my stomach, if that meal was still alive and squirming happily. Please stop that, I think at it, to no avail. Maybe I'm lying to myself. Maybe I wouldn't give this a moment's thought if I didn't need their stolen power to keep myself alive. I expected as much, Yulasri says with only a small tinge of disappointment. Search as long as you must, then. Perhaps another time. Another time? I can only think of one other nightmare like this, but how often has this happened? How many more times will she rip my world apart, then vanish from even my thoughts? I know what she could do to me at any second. Carrying on a conversation with her, doing anything more than answering when she speaks and hoping for her to leave, feels like plunging my hand into a frozen fire, just on the distant hope that my ruined fingers will curl around some precious secret. But what's a little more pain? If you really just wanted to talk, why? Why me? Who are you? I ask. Ulasri only shrugs non-committally, a bizarrely childish, human gesture coming from whatever she is. She doesn't feel the way harbingers do. She doesn't feel like anything. Why not? This world makes all of our dreams into delusions. All desperate, hopeless dreamers are my kin. But here, so few of you listen. So few third angels so much as try to understand. You listen, so I speak. Okay. That follows. I can't imagine I'm special enough to be the only third angel. The only person with dreams worth invading. I'm really trying to figure all of this out. But I can't understand what you're trying to say if it all just disappears when I wake up. So if that's something you do, some power you control, please don't. That thin, hollow smile flashes back into being, but only for an instant. I am only a phantasm. A thing more felt than heard and recalled. This is only a dream, but what a dream means lingers well after dawn chases it away. Nothing you need will escape you. Is it a dream? I mean, yes, but that doesn't mean it isn't real. You aren't some tarot character I'm talking to myself through, I push. Ulasri answers with a curious tilt of her head. Right. Sorry, it's just I wasn't really thinking about this last time. I suppress a fresh shudder. But I think I've seen you somewhere else. Or someone saw something like you and wrote it into our stories. I summon a deck of my cards, close at hand in my sleep just the way it always is, pluck out the undreaming, and pass it to her. She takes it in two spectral fingers and stares down at it. What is this? She asks. The eerie, ethereal distance in her voice has vanished, sharpened to an icicle point. I gulp. What is this? She hisses again. The light of 100 stars dying at once flares in her eyes, then is swiftly smothered. This was wrong. This was a mistake. I shouldn't have said anything. Maybe all of us have things we shouldn't know. But I'm certain she won't just let this go, and there's no point in lying to something that could turn me inside out on a whim. She's from a myth. I think it's a myth. Clyasia's daughter. All the pain in the world broke her, and her nightmares about it started becoming monsters, or turning people into them, I mumble. Silence as deep and heavy as sinking into the darkest ocean trench. Until Ulasri laughs. She squeezes her arms around herself, leaving the card to flutter to the ground as her silhouette tightens and she bursts into a manic giggling fit. Her whispering voice resounds endlessly, echoes layering upon echoes until the world is enveloped in the soft white noise of 1,000 black butterfly wing beats. It's just a weird old story you reminded me of. I don't think it's true, so dash. She ignores me, choking on her own breathless voice until it sounds like she must be in pain. The whole world bends, swirling into a chaotic mess around her. Howling wind rushes from everywhere to nowhere, its scream merging with Ulasri's agonized laugh. Her body twists itself up, spiraling into an endlessly dark hole in everything, and the night around her spins and swirls until reality is nothing but a storm circling a drain. I wake up soaked in frigid sweat. Too familiar empty pain racks my body, and even tucked beneath my covers, it's so desperately cold. I feel like a living corpse, without so much as body heat to push back against the cold numbness. I probably am. It feels like I might as well not have slept at all, too. I guess it would be strange if I weren't having nightmares after last night. Already, I'm not sure what they're about, and there is some small mercy in that, probably, but I can imagine easily enough. Wriggling and squirming and failing even to properly stretch, I shove Pearl away from her place clutched to my chest. It's probably not comfy there anymore. Ugh. Maybe I'll give her a bath later. I linger in my bed there for a while longer, trying to gather up the energy to do anything else, until a small, cold hand on my shoulder interrupts my fitful not-rest. Liodane, Vuji says. When I roll over, she's seated on my nightstand, looking down at me with a softer expression than I've ever seen on her. BLRG morning, I say. Did you know? About what? I check in on my children sometimes, but I can't read your thoughts. I have heard about your friend, she says uncertainly. I nod. Yes. I know how little this is worth, but I am sorry. Sometimes it's unavoidable, but most of us consider every lost keeper at least something of a failure on our parts. Okay. Thanks. Maybe she doesn't watch quite that closely, then. I always wonder how much attention she's paying to me, in the stretches between when I usually call for her. That isn't what I was asking, though. I guess I'm not sure why I thought you'd know what I meant. Vuji's face relaxes into its usual placid, too calm look. In that case, what was? Last night NGH. Some half-remembered nightmare stabs into me like a cold knife in my brain. Vuji's dark eyes widen, settling as I shake off the momentary pain. Last night, I did a tarot reading with my power for the first time. It showed me a lot of things I really didn't like about myself. And the world. Like that the harbingers we eat are still there. Still aware, in some form. Still in pain, maybe probably. I think it's the same for Shona. And I'm not sure what it would be like if you don't get eaten, but maybe it's the same for everyone who dies, too. Nothing shows on Vuji's face, but I read into her unnatural stillness all the same. I can't tell if she's surprised or simply taking as long as I'll give her to decide what to say. Yes. I'm afraid I did know that, she says slowly. The knowing makes every loss hurt us that much more. As for your friend's situation, it is possible that some great work of magic emergence, to wit could resurrect Shona, if she were retrieved from her killer. I must urge maybe not restraint, but certainly caution, if you plan to pursue that harbinger. I might. I think I might even be able to do it myself. Bring her back if I reach her, not run off and fight the harbinger alone. That gets an odd reaction from her, a proud smile beneath eyes narrowed. Uncertainly. But not right away. I can't do anything like I am now. Anyway, it's not just about her. I don't want the harbingers suffering forever, either. I don't want that for anyone. Ah. Vuji nods once. I understand. I don't feel or fear for them the way I do for you, but there is no justice in that fate. I don't want to shrug and say, well, that's awful, but it is how it is either. Why is it like this? How do I make it stop? Vuji's gaze shifts, rising to stare out at the sky through my window. I genuinely don't know. It takes a very particular type of perception to notice it, much less interact with the dead, but it's been this way for at least as long as I can remember. Which, I will tell you, is a very long time. There's a hardness in her eyes when she meets mine again. For a moment, they look less like dark, shiny dolphin's eyes and more like a thin sheen of water passing over black stone. So, what do you propose? You know what harbingers would make of the world, left to do as they please. How many of them do you think present dilemmas more complex than whether you or they can survive? My duty is to my children, and I don't consider it useful to paralyze you with the fear that you might encounter one of those few. Even if you did, your survival is more important to me. Fine, just I should have known. If it weren't for those weird senses, I could have just pushed on and never had any idea that there was a problem I'd want to do something about at all. Would knowing from your first day have changed your mind, she asks. I don't know. I cry, blinking away cold tears. Yes you do, my own voice whispers. Fair enough. I won't get anywhere by lying about myself. Probably not, I admit. I still don't want to die. But it's not just the harbingers, either. What about everyone else? What happens to all the people right here who'll be dead soon? What's it mean to return to the sea? Do you know that? There's another telling, expressionless pause before Vuji sighs, her shoulders sagging. Lyodane, I will never lie to you, nor to any of my children. I cannot and would not if I could. If I withhold anything from you, it's because I don't yet believe sharing it is in your best interests. So all I can do is ask that you believe me now. There are things we cannot share freely with the world. We've tried. We've seen what happens when we do. What do you think would change if every human knew what we were discussing now? Knew that there was absolutely nothing they could do about it? I'm sure you can imagine, and I hope you keep whatever you've imagined in mind when I ask you not to spread this information too freely. Truth is the furthest thing from an unquestionable good, she says, and lapses back into stone-faced silence. I'm sure she's right. I really don't think the answer is that anyone who knew about this would become a keeper to escape it. If I agree, will you answer my question? Or is that not in my best interests? I press. It's not for me to say, at least not entirely. I had no part in my siblings' answer to this problem. I can tell you that they do their best to minimize pain for those in their care. If it helps, think of it as a place like this hospice, for souls who can no longer be comforted in any other way. It really, really doesn't. Forever, I say. Or until a better way presents itself. So, if you consider something about this sorry state of things intolerable, search for a way to change it. Vuji hops down from the nightstand and leans against my bed, bringing her face to my level. This is not the conversation I was expecting to have, when I came here. I wish I could offer you more. I wish I could encourage you more fully. I can't promise that such a thing is possible, or that any solutions you find would be at all desirable. But your power is your own, and it's your right to do what you feel you must with it. Then I will. I don't know what I'll do yet. But I will. I'll look forward to it. But please, do find a way to care for yourself first, she says, and vanishes without fanfare. So I sit mostly alone in my room and think, and do my best to shove away the pain, until the morning of Shona's funeral comes. It was a quieter night than a few of my last ones. I don't feel any worse than usual if nothing else. It seems like my health has stabilized in a strange way, settled down on a baseline of the worst possible state I can be in. It doesn't feel like it's getting worse or preparing to kill me. I don't much want to rely on that being true, but unless I'm going to take my own shadow's advice and start eating my fill from the nearest untainted souls, I don't know what else to do. I don't know what I'll do today, either. I'm staring at the wall over my desk, trying to decide, when my phone chimes with another unexpected call. Aisling again. I pick it up. Hey, she says, weariness clear as ever in her voice. Hi. Will you be there today? Will he? I ask. Look, probably, yeah, but Roland seriously isn't going to start any shit at a funeral. I already asked him and dash. You what? I sputter. I do, but when he came after me, when I asked if we could talk to you about the whole thing, he said it didn't matter if you believe me because there are ways to fool your power. Aisling snorts out a bitter laugh. Yeah, well, Roland's an asshole. I'm sure you know what it means that I can say that, too. What he meant was that there are linguistic tricks and mental complications that can muddy my results or keep something misleading from pinging as a technical lie, not that there's some magic way to spoof my detection entirely. If there is, I don't know about it. As for those, my club and I keep track of them and actively search for more, and he wasn't using any loopholes we know of, I'm pretty sure. Yeah. I mean, he said it clear as speech can be, at least. Honestly, it sounds like he just wanted you to himself. Maybe. His reason why Naiv couldn't be involved didn't really hold up either. But, If I go, I'm seriously going to hold you to that, pretty sure. Fine. Do it. I'll be there if anything blows up, Aisling says. Was that the only concern? It's very much not. I still feel terrible and I can't see myself being at all okay at a funeral, least of all one where I'm fairly sure the person it's for is trapped in some fate worse than death. But I really do want to help her, and if there's any way to do that without making any more of a disaster of my own life, I think I'll find it with the handful of keepers who've decided, for some reason, not to think the worst of me. The only one I might have stayed home over. I'll see you soon. When it comes into view, the chancel of the silent vessel reminds me of nothing so much as the soul sanctuary. Maybe that's just because I haven't been to very many churches. A lot of their more important buildings look like this. White walls, rounded edges, sea-colored glass windows. The surfaces here seem less compact than the sanctuary's pristine fortress walls, with tiny pores and smooth needle tips that make it look like the entire structure was grown from a single enormous piece of coral. It's much wider than it is tall, with at least the front half forming an almost perfect circle no higher than a normal house. Lyodane? Hey! We're here. A man's voice startles me out of my own head. Iriel, the aide I asked to drive me here. I don't know if they've technically updated the parts of my files that say I shouldn't leave the hospice, but everyone working there knows by now that my files don't mean anything. Oh. Thanks. We'd been driving along the shore on the edge of the wheel's thick canopy for some time, leaving me to stare out the back seat window and think in useless circles. Iriel climbs out, opens the back door, and offers me his arm. Reluctantly, I take it, wobble to my feet, and more or less steady myself on my cane. Standing up makes my head spin and my legs threaten to buckle and snap like twigs. Do you need me to wait for you? No, that's okay. I don't know how long I'll be. And I'm not sure if I could slog through this knowing I can walk out the door and be home in 20 minutes the first time someone looks at me. All right. Well, just call whenever you need a ride back, okay? I'm sorry about your friend. Me too. Iriel lingers a bit, watching to make sure I can move without dying. By the time I hear him drive off, I'm halfway down the straight, tree-lined approach. I'm alone here. Even the parking lot off to the side isn't as full as I expected. Which'll make it harder to disappear into the crowd. For once, I actually wish there were more people. This is the last place and time I want anyone paying attention to me. It's not even just about what I've done and the people I don't want to see, either. I've never understood funerals. I've spent my whole life next to death, lost a friend close enough that it's at least a little bit my fault she's dead, and I still can't imagine how they're supposed to help anyone. They aren't for the dying, they're dead, gone to wherever souls go. And for everyone else, it's not as if a big event where you're meant to make a show of your pain and judged if it's not the right kind of pain will make the person you lost any less dead. Keeper funerals made the least sense of all to me. Keepers never just die, they're killed or much, much worse. How are you meant to celebrate their life or thank them for their sacrifice, as if they gave their life rescuing a bunch of kittens from a burning building or something instead of making a mistake that got them devoured body and soul, when you know all too well what actually happened to them? When the monster that did it could still be out there, waiting for a chance to do it again? If I got eaten, whether people thought I did any of it for them and held me up as some kind of hero would be the last thing on my mind. Well, not because it wouldn't matter to me, although it wouldn't, but because I'd have a much bigger problem. And almost no one does know what actually happens when you die, do they? They have no idea how much worse the truth could be, unless they've all just decided to be silent about it. With that in mind, I guess there's some chance that funerals are for the dead. Whatever it means to return to the sea, though, I really don't think what happens to your soul depends on whether you had your broken shell's ashes dumped into the ocean or how sad people were while they did it. It means something different for keepers, yes, but knowing what I know now, I still can't see how it would matter. Still, here I am. What's even the point? Why am I risking this? Yes. Why? There's nothing here you couldn't take on your own. My voice. My gaunt, bitterly smiling face. My own spectre walks right beside me, leering at me through a shroud of white hair wet with black water. Well, fine, me. Maybe I don't need their help. There's so much more to take than I ever imagined, after all. At the true scale of things, I don't even know if it makes a difference if any given person dies at the end of their lifespan or right now when I drain them dry. But they don't want to die any more than I do, and I don't want to be the kind of monster who'd drink everyone and reach up until there's nothing left. Wait. That isn't even right. I'm not here because I'm hungry, not only here for that. This isn't about me. Shona needs help. I can help her. I just can't chase after the thing that ate her alone, not in my current state, and this is where I'll find everyone who'd want to help her if they knew she was still there. The phantasm at my side says nothing else. She only smiles a little wider before she pops out of being like a soap bubble. I push the "press to open" button next to the chancel's glass doors and lurch into the vestibule. The chamber is lit by evenly sized and shaped coral formations on the walls like little torches, but with no bulbs, they're just suffused with soft, blue-white bioluminescence. Both walls are lined with decorative niches filled with all sorts of art depicting the saints, I think. I only really recognize Kuri and Nisla at a glance, one represented as a planter of tiny trees somehow grown together into the shape of a young woman, clad in regalia crafted from flowers and vines, the other an androgynous figure in a white greatcoat with a rain cape decorated in elaborate patterns not so far from the ones on the windows here. A half-sphere of paneled glass blooms from the hand above their head, scattering the light above into prismatic beams. Ahead, the chamber splits into two wide, curving halls around a central set of opaque, sea-blue glass doors. An attendant in a simple blue mantle and long, wide white skirt of a junior priestess looks me over, squinting slightly, then nods to herself. Welcome. Are you here for screaming him Shona's return? Return? No, I'm here to bring her back to life. But I guess that's just a formal term for today's service. Emicham. You'll find it that way, she says with a gesture to my left. Most of the guests we're expecting have already arrived, but the ceremony proper won't begin for some time yet. Right. Thanks. Ah, and while it's by no means required for keepers to transform, it is customary. I look down at one of my usual dresses, which I'd figured would be close enough to funeral wear to count, and shrug. Calling my magic into the world briefly smothers the lights and casts the hall in strange twisting shadows, but the priestess only watches with her head slightly bowed, neither awed nor terrified. I don't feel much better or worse for the change, but thinking on it now, I am glad to have my mask. My secrets are mostly out, and it won't protect me from anything my immunity mist doesn't, but it still feels a bit like armor against the danger of other people looking at me. So, that finished, I follow the distant murmur of voices down the hall. That impression of the entire building as an above-ground coral reef is much stronger inside. Its walls are a thick lattice of blue-white ridges, grown together into a gently arched ceiling. Its window frames, decorative niches, and even the benches lining the hall all seem grown rather than crafted, though the benches stand out for still being wood-colored. I read once that coral comes from millions of tiny little critters who live in a big clump. They make reefs by forming exoskeletons around themselves, and those hard, rocky shells linger after they die, so the next generation of critters can keep building and building their city atop their friends' and family's colorful corpses, then add their own to the pile. How different is our city? Our world? Do our ghosts just sink beneath the cities they've built and pile up forever, an invisible boneyard at the bottom of the world? No, of course not, they bloom in their fullness and return to the sea. Whatever that's supposed to mean. Oh, how bad could it possibly be? They do their best to minimize pain, don't they? There is that. Vuji said so, and everyone says messengers can't lie. It's probably true, or else she wouldn't have said it in the least reassuring way possible. She wouldn't have left me thinking of all the people dumped on the ocean floor making their own reefs, growing corals with little human faces, staring up through the water and thinking of the lives they no longer live, but are never really allowed to leave. No longer live, maybe. But they never die. Yes. And somehow, it's hard even for me to imagine that as a good thing. It's a short walk to the source of the voices, a wide opening on the right. Judging from the sound and the souls on the other side of the wall, a confusing blur of 9 or 10 keepers and about as many ordinary motes of human life, there's not as many people as I thought there'd be. I don't do well with crowds, but I also don't do well with groups of strangers too small to disappear into. I can't decide which is worse. I creep along the wall, peeking in through the doorway at an angle I can't see much of anything from, and slowly work up the nerve to step around the corner. If Shona were here, she'd be the one to drag me inside. And the one to stand up for me, for some strange reason, if no one else wants me around. I brush away my first tears of the day. That doesn't have to be a miserable memory of how badly I treated her. I can fix this. That's why I'm here. I steel myself and step inside. The first thing that strikes me, almost literally, is that it's cold in here. Impossibly so, well beyond the clinging chill of my barrier. It's like someone bottled a winter morning where the sun keeps the breeze from stinging too bitterly and let it loose inside. Sunlight floods in through a colored glass ceiling stained in wavy patterns of blue and gray and green, gently tinting the white pews the colors of a shallow sea. Azure curtains are drawn over the back walls, and on the altar in front of them, there's an elaborate arrangement of red coral and black flowers into a jagged lightning pattern, fanning out around a blue urn and a framed photograph of Shona in her regalia, grinning and waving to the camera. And most of the people scattered around the pews are already looking my way. Right. They can feel me, I can feel them. I'm an idiot. I glance around, quickly picking the faces I know out of the small crowd. Aisling sits alone near the entrance, one hand raised in greeting. Maid is between 2 adults and a younger boy, and none of them acknowledge me with more than a quick glance up. They're all focused on her, and she looks and feels miserably exhausted. Neither she nor Aisling have transformed. In the same row of seats, another adult man sits with his arm around a sobbing woman. The 2 keepers to my left carry right on talking to each other. The girl in the plain black dress and dark leather jacket, only marked as a keeper by her aura and pale pink hair in a loose side ponytail, does most of the talking. The tall girl in the gray suit and featureless metal mask, Mary Highland, she was on that keeper reef, mostly just leans against the wall looking imposing. And the biggest group in the room, clustered around the middle. The Stardust Seraph, in an almost priestly outfit rather like his regalia, but mostly white save red trimming along the hem and entirely sans his armor and headgear, greets me with a soft, knowing smile and a 2-fingered salute as soon as I spot him. Teth Fianata blanches at the sight of me, visibly wincing, and seems to untense only slightly when Roland gives her a gentle clap on the shoulder. The Silver King, dressed in military finery and seated across from one pew in a wheelchair held by a spectral soldier, watches me through the corner of her eye. Tarnished Angel, the swan-winged, bandage-armed girl I met on the night I found Sariana, spares me only a glance up from her conversation with Frozen Sun Iona. At a glance, a young woman in a royal blue cloak, in her 90s but forever frozen at 16. Skin the blue-white shade of fresh snow under a clear sky. Eyes sculpted from ice, but bright with frozen flame. Our city's founding hero and oldest, most important keeper by decades, looking my way with narrowed eyes, flecks of the snow floating all around her settled on her lashes. You must be Ina, she says mildly. My trembling fingers tighten around my cane. I've spent the last month eating her city. I put her daughter in a hospital. I can't be here, I don't want to die, I don't even know what that means. Hey. I'm glad you made it, Aisling says, looking at me as one would a bomb that might be armed. Hi, I mutter, flicking my eyes between them. I've heard a lot about you. Good things. More than you may expect. She beckons to her pew, inviting me into her group. Asking me to sit right between her and the two keepers I've fought. What do you mean? I whisper, frozen in place. I can barely hear my own voice. I wonder if the sound is traveling at all or just turning to frozen breath in the air. A small smile spreads across Iona's face. It looks curious, almost warm. Only that you strike me as someone who's been running non-stop, never stopping to look at where she's ended up. Or how far and fast she's gone. Oh. Thanks, I croak. That's a strange way to describe me, because all of a sudden, I can't imagine taking another step into this room. It doesn't feel physically possible. Aisling, I have to talk to you about something. Outside. Could we? Aisling glances over her shoulder, suppressing a grimace, then nods once. We'll be back, she says. Of course. Take your time, Iona calls after us. Aisling follows me to the nearest bench out of line of sight from the room. Thanks. Sorry about that, I say. It's hard to sit down without just losing my balance and falling back, but I manage it this time. Aisling plops into place at my side, tapping her foot rhythmically on the ground. You're seriously not in trouble, you know. You saw Roland, and Iona's I'd be surprised if she's pleased about the Teth thing, but I really don't think she's out for your blood. Honestly, sounds to me like she likes you. She wasn't lying. Aisling's dressed in a simple black blouse and dress pants, but still wears her usual beret over her curly blonde hair. She only looks a little more tired than usual, but that's not saying much. Keepers get into trouble sometimes, Fianatas or not. She has more important things to do than avenge a fight Teth lost weeks ago. Okay, fine, but why is she even here? Shona didn't know her, did she? I ask. What? No. Maybe they crossed paths a couple times, but no. She comes to almost all of these. Oh. Well. Sorry again. It's just a lot. Aisling shakes her head. It's fine. Nothing's really started yet. They're just talking, telling stories, and I've already heard most of them. I didn't know Shona the best, but better than a lot of them, I think. From your school? From my club. She wasn't a member, but she had a lot of questions about the promise before she made it. Good for her, I said. Not enough of us have questions. Really? What questions? Shona seemed like she loved everything about being a keeper. Even the nightmare monsters, when they didn't get too personal. I'd have imagined her jumping at the offer and never once looking back. Shows how little I knew about her. Did I ask Vuji enough for Aisling's standards? I don't know. I doubt it. Some were personal. But mostly, she wanted to know why us. What makes someone a keeper candidate? Aisling leans back and cups her chin, staring at the ceiling for a long stretch of silence. I'd have called this part her business, but you'll see for yourself soon enough. Best if it doesn't take you by surprise. She didn't want to be a keeper if Maid couldn't be one with her. Okay. That worked out for them eventually, didn't it? Aisling glances back at the room, waiting and watching for a few beats. When they were together, when you sensed them, how did Maid feel? Not like much of anything. When we first met, I thought they were one person until I actually saw them. I guess she isn't very strong, but what's your point? Exactly that, Aisling says. Maid lost her magic when Shona died. What? How? A keeper's power is theirs. It's them. Nothing but death should be able to take it away, and I'm not at all sure about that anymore. The Harbinger? Did it do something to her? I guess. No. To my knowledge, nothing like that's ever happened. I don't believe it's possible. Aisling sighs, slouching down to rest her chin in cupped hands. I don't think she ever was a keeper. That feels like it should be shocking, should be a wild, absurd idea, but it really isn't. It's just an answer to a set of questions I never cared enough to ask sliding suddenly into place. Maid felt like nothing to me. She had no soul sight of her own. They fed her every harbinger they could and still she never seemed to become anything more than an armed and armored guardian. A weapon at Shona's side. Did it even matter which of them claimed their hearts? If this magic is mine, if it's me the way every other keeper says, and all it's given me is weapons and armor and extra skill with using them, I don't think it's such a big ask for them to appeal to me, you know. Then what? Her witch? Aisling shakes her head. It's very rare, but there have been keepers whose magic works to empower other people. They call those people retainers. I don't think that's quite it here, though. They did make the promise together. You're on the right track, but it's probably more like Maid was Shona's implement. An extra one. An aspect of her magic, only much more distinct from her and her power than usual. That doesn't sound any better for her. No, Aisling agrees. I'd suspected something like it for a while, but couldn't say if either of them knew. I never saw a point in pressing them on it. Maybe I should have. Maybe. But maybe take your own advice. She's the one who told me just a few days ago that there was no point in blaming myself for everything I didn't happen to do. Aisling slumps a little further down. Yeah, that's fair. Every time I felt like getting nosy about it, I just ended up thinking, well, good for them, right? They got what they wanted. They were doing well together. It might not help them to have some know-it-all tell them their powers might be I didn't even know what. I couldn't tell if it was an actual problem for them. MHM. Maybe it would be nice if anyone could be a keeper just because they wanted to, or it'd make things easier for someone they cared about. Or not, there could be some great reason why it doesn't work that way. I don't know. All it means to me is that the person closest to Shona probably can't do anything to help her. I don't know if it would have changed anything. I don't think so. But that's not really what we're here for, anyhow, I say. True. I just thought you might prefer talking theory for a bit. I do, too. But at some point, I should actually get in and go to the funeral. I guess. How's everyone doing? Like you'd expect. Maid especially, and Shona's parents I don't know. They aren't really talking to anyone. Not that I can blame them. Aisling straightens up in her seat, quickly fixes her hat, and looks me over. How about you? I haven't gotten any worse. If it's not a personal thing, why'd you pick that outfit? Oh, did the lady at the front want you in your magical best too? I just think it's silly. Feels like they're trying to frame keepers as some elite fraternal order instead of a bunch of weird kids with a job that, for whatever reason, only weird kids can do. To borrow Shona's language, I know she wouldn't give half a shit what I wore here, and that's all I care about. I can't help but smile at that beneath my mask. No. She wouldn't. Is that what pink hair thinks, too? Aisling snorts. Who, Erica? No idea what she thinks. Her outfit's just I don't think they'd throw her out if she wore it, but it isn't really funeral appropriate. Oh. I wonder for a bit what that means, but it doesn't really matter. I don't care much about what keepers are to the rest of the world. I'm sure I don't qualify as whatever they want us to be, no matter what I wear. How about you? Aisling asks. You seem like you're handling this better than I'd expected, if you'll excuse me saying. Well, this was always my plan. If anyone will understand, if anyone will have ideas to make this work, she will. I am. Because I think we can bring her back. Aisling's face gives away nothing but a nervous twitch in one eye. For a long, long while, she stares at me, almost unblinking. You're serious. Please explain, she says. I nod. I'm not sure if you'd already figured any of this out, so stop me if something needs more explaining, I guess. When we absorb harbingers, we don't digest them like food for our souls to grow. They're still there, only part of us now instead of whatever they were before. With you so far. Absorption or certainly eating are shorthand terms for a complex process that may not even work the same for every keeper. Of course, I don't know if it works the same for everyone, but given how emergence works, I don't think any of them get digested. Mine are there enough that they can sort of talk to me. Aisling narrows her eyes at that. Sort of. How do they communicate? What do they say? Not quite in words most of the time. I don't think. I wince as the pain in my head spikes. Jumbled spikes of memory from the night I did my reading stab through my thoughts, melting like splinters of ice before I can grab onto them. Mostly they can just tell me how they're feeling about things. It's easiest to understand the one who likes me and hardest with the one I split in half with Maid. I haven't figured out how to talk back yet. Maybe if I could speak their language instead of just hear it. Aisling lets out a low, resigned groan. Is it important to where you're going with this that there's one that likes you? I don't think so. Leaving that alone for now, then. Go ahead. Okay. So, I think I'm pretty sure the same thing happens when harbingers eat us. Probably for everyone else who dies, too, but I don't know what that means for them or what returning to the sea actually is. My point is that if we kill the harbinger that killed Shona, she should still be there. I can steal life, other keepers can heal, so as long as we have her soul, there should be. Wait. Hold on. Stop, Aisling hisses under her breath. You're making all kinds of leaps now that don't follow from where you started. They don't. I bite my lip, tracing my own steps backwards. I don't quite remember how I ended up thinking about normal people that night, but yes, they do. We know what happens when magical beings eat each other. We know from your power that, they return to the sea, is a true description of what happens to the dead, and nothing works the way it should for reincarnation to be a thing. Keepers and harbingers aren't the same thing. Yes, there are obvious parallels in how magic functions, but we don't know what does and doesn't work the same way for us, and if we could pull these rescue operations where we pluck someone's soul out basically intact any time we kill a harbinger that's killed keepers, then Aisling trails off. Her eyes widen. The light in them leaves sunspots in my vision. Your title's different, she says. That can happen. Different how? Different like, Aisling lets out a long exhale through her nose. I'm not really sure. Just different. You're still, ill wind, but you're good with sensing magic, aren't you? Does it feel different to you? Looking closely enough at keepers' souls to really read them is always a confusing, overwhelming thing, enough that I don't make a habit of scrutinizing everyone I meet. My own is no different, and I'd only barely begun to make sense of what I see in it, so I steel myself before I turn my gaze inward. There is something new, beneath the abstract poetry of my soul's awful name, but I can't place it. It's like trying to smell tea in a coffee shop or identify one of a dozen musty odors in an old attic. Maybe if I pushed harder, dug deeper, but that feels dangerous. I have enough to worry about right now. And I've already made enough of a scene without plunging myself into another nightmare like my last tarot reading. I can't really tell. It feels less like it's different and more like there's something new there. What's it mean? I ask. I'm not sure. But you've mentioned talking to Naiv, right? Have you sensed her? Pain and guilt deep enough to drown whatever her presence used to express. I nod, shuddering at the memory of it. As far as I know. I suppose it is a particularly horrible one, if you're right. And it's not as if your title's actually changed, so we'll figure it out. One world-breaking mystery at a time, though. Aisling chews her lip thoughtfully. We sit in silence, staring across the hall at a mural of some legendary hero who appears to have been a giant fluffy moth with wings of white fire. And while we're working on this, I know what you'll think of what I'm about to say. I've been in your place before. But at least for now I won't say keep this strictly between us, but don't go in there and shout it to everyone, okay? What? Why not? They should know the girl they're here to mourn isn't dead. We don't know that. Aisling says. Listen. I'm not saying you're crazy. I'm not saying you're wrong. I can tell that you believe this, and I don't know anything that would disprove it, but that doesn't rule out any number of candidate explanations in which you're mistaken, or manipulated, or experiencing something through the lens of your power that does not extend to the fate of every human who's ever died. I asked Vuji about this. She said she already knew and the messengers do their best to minimize pain for those in their care, but she wouldn't tell me the whole story because something bad would happen if she did. Okay, yes, that sounds bad, but I still think that before we go back to Shona's funeral and announce something like hey, death isn't and has never been real, we should make damn sure we verified that idea. Then verify it. You can do that, can't you? If I dropped everything to go research this, sure. I'd need to dig through everything public about or relating to this subject, make certain I'm not wasting a question on something that's already been answered, then formulate a version of the question that will get us a reliable answer with the minimum possible risk of setting my mind on fire. I have a process. And a priority listing of other very important questions. I only step outside of it for urgent emergency uses. And yeah, if it's true this sounds pretty urgent, but it's not going to change based on whether we start work on the question of, she pauses to look uneasily back at the room, lowering her voice when she speaks again, of how dying even works right this second. You don't know that, I insist. It could be worse for Shona the longer she's in there. The sound of Aisling's teeth grinding practically fills the hall. It could. And if it turns out that she is in there in some form that can be retrieved, suffering in a way that could have been mitigated if we'd acted faster, I'll accept responsibility for that then. But it's not as if you've come to me with a concrete plan of action, is it? You have an idea that may be true and something we may, in principle, be able to accomplish if it is. Correct me if we can verify that you have some incredible new resurrection power. But more importantly, we don't know where this harbinger is, when we'll next see it, how we could find it, or if whatever group we could put together right this instant would win in a fight against it without burning even more questions. Aisling fidgets frantically in her seat as she speaks, contracting herself into something less like a ball and more like a pretzel atop the bench by the time she finishes. And meanwhile, what I do know beyond a reasonable doubt is that things will get worse for my stupid friend Isabel the longer I take to drag her out of her current situation. And for the rest of her harbinger's active cult, which I'm still working to pin down. Right. I know that. I'm sorry, I mutter. I never forgot about Isabel, but between everything that happened after I last saw her, everything I've learned, it's been hard to think much of her. I still want to help her, too. If there's any way I can. Somewhere deep in the recesses of my soul, in a place hidden from the callous gaze of the sun, Alunla seethes in silence. It can't hurt me, but it can make me feel how very much it wants to. Thanks. I'd have understood if you were more focused on this other thing, after how our last disaster went, Aisling says through a sad smile. But again. One thing at a time. We should get back to the funeral or people will start asking us what's taking so long, and that'd be an awkward thing for me to answer. I wasn't really thinking about this either, but could any of them have just listened with magic? Aisling grunts, trying to force out a word that just won't come. She thumps a fist against the bench, scowling at nothing in particular. I don't think so. Not in any ways that wouldn't be conspicuous to at least one of us. To my knowledge. That was a lot of caveats. There's still a lot of things whirling through my head. It's hard to even think clearly of what I came here for. I'm certain I can't grieve Shona when I'm fairly sure that neither she nor anyone else has ever died, but it's not like I could if I didn't believe that. I'm not so good at letting go of anything. And if nothing else, there are already things in and about this world I'm more afraid of than Iona Fianata. Fine, I say, and take her hand. And to get through this without breaking anyone else's conception of death. Fine. Why wait? They'll all know soon enough, won't they? If anyone was eavesdropping on us, they aren't letting it show. By the time we get back to the funeral, 2 priests are lighting votive candles around the altar, and most of the small crowd has returned to their quiet conversations. Or not so quiet, in the case of the pink-haired keeper in the corner. Erica, apparently. She waves at us as we enter, then goes back to talking to Mary. Yeah, so Shona turned up at my school one day, back when I went. Said some girls on Flow needed a keeper to get rid of the ghost in the bathroom, so there she was. Erica slumps, covering her eyes with her palm, and sighs. No. They sure aren't. I'm not here to tell 2 girls I don't know how real ghosts are or how terrible that is for everyone. I keep walking, not sure where I'm meant to be. I'll feel just as out of place anywhere. When I stop, halfway down the aisle, Aisling turns around and shoots me a curious look. I gesture over the pews and tilt my head. She shrugs, gesturing to Maid and the group I imagine is her family with one thumb. Maid is the only other person I really know here, and I don't think she hates me anymore, but I motion for Aisling to come closer. Is it okay to tell her? I whisper. She should know. She deserves that much. Aisling bites her lip. We really should verify what you think we know, first. Imagine if you tell her something like that and you're wrong. Or there's nothing we can do about it. I'm not wrong. But I'm not sure about the second part, I admit. All I really have to go on is what? A weird tarot reading? Some part of me that thinks I could solve all my problems if I'd just eat everyone? Because you could. You've already done so much with so little. Maybe. But it doesn't matter. I'm not eating the city to find out. Fine, I say. Thanks. Aisling nods once, then makes her way to the central pews, sitting behind one of the crowded ones. Which brings me back to my first problem. I don't really want to talk to Maid while I'm holding something like this back. Sorry, Maid, so where else is safe? Do I brood in an empty corner, hoping everyone ignores me, or join Aisling in the cluster of people I least want to be part of? Ugh. At least no one can get me alone there. And Aisling can hold Roland to his promise not to bother me. I take a seat next to her, and no one seems to pay me much mind. Except for Teth Fianata, who's still staring at me like something contagious. Hi, Teth, I say. I'm sorry about. About what? Have you changed your mind now? What would you have done differently? My voice whispers, a sneer in its sound. Shut up. I never wanted to hurt her. That had nothing to do with Alunla or the people it killed. The book I fought her over didn't even matter to it. It was just a stupid mistake. Emicham. You'll do better next time. Teth stares at me, blank-faced. About? She prods. Oh. Sorry. About that whole thing. I didn't mean to hurt you. I just, had a very stupid idea I thought was very important. You were right about it. It won't happen again. It won't happen again. Seriously? That's it? Why'd you put me in the hospital over a monster the first time? She yells. I flinch. I can barely hear her over the sound of shredding paper screaming through my skull in protest. Teth, Iona scolds, her voice gentle. Whatever the mistake, the first time it's made is a lesson. Teth's head darts back to glance over her shoulder. And we'll talk again the second time. All right, she stammers. I'm not really sure what she means by that, but Iona smiles and nods. Even in those simple gestures, she moves like her body is an instrument she's spent decades mastering, a facet of her power she controls as completely as any other, and the flecks of snow drifting around her seem to dance in time with her, emphasizing every little thing she does. So, turning back to me, Teth folds her arms and squeezes her elbows, like she can't quite decide if she's protecting herself or trying to look stern. Is there gonna be a second time? No. I just told you it was a stupid idea. Things really would have gone a lot smoother if you'd told us before, though, Roland says as he steps into the conversation. Told you what? I snap. That you thought you needed to do the stuff you were doing to live, he replies plainly. As reasons go, that's a pretty good one. Where'd you, I start, but quickly trail off. Naive, probably. Right. That's fine. It doesn't matter. I've already heard from almost everyone I've met how terrible I was at keeping secrets. There are more eyes on our conversation now, but of them, only Teth looks at all surprised. Roland. We talked about exactly this, Aisling warns. Roland raises his hands, palms open. And I meant what I said. I just wanted Ina to know I'm okay if she is. I think we're about even. It's fine, Aisling, I say. Yes. I'm over it. And you're right, my health stuff was a stupid thing to hide and my life would be a lot easier if I hadn't. Maybe if he hadn't been so creepy about it, but it doesn't really matter, unless Roland's scheming something I just can't be bothered to puzzle out. Knowing what I know now, it feels ridiculous that I was ever worried about some stupid thing like what people would think of my deadly disease they could all look at anyway. Oh, and that's not my name. I'm Lyodane. There was really nothing sinister about it, I'm just tired of keeping track of who I use which name with. Don't tell my dad. Well, Lyodane, it's a pleasure to finally meet you. The smile on his perfectly sculpted face reaches his bright red eyes, sincere as can be. It's too warm and bright and radiant to possibly be real. I still can't help but read smug satisfaction into it. After all, he didn't believe me from the start. I'm not sure. I don't really care. Teth's eyes dart back and forth between us. Her mouth twitches back into a nervous smile, which she looks like she's straining to hold. It's almost charming, isn't it, Nilamai? Iona says with a sidelong glance at the swan-winged keeper. New keepers always think their first mistakes will herald the end of the world, and they've all been wrong so far. You must remember the cleanup we used to do for Alva, Goddess keep her, Iona says. Goddess keep her, Nilamai echoes with a wistful smile. Her wings droop as she speaks, settling around her like a feathered capelet. Adamant Titan Alva? What about her? I ask. Everyone liked her. She made the promise at 11, bent earth and steel to her will, carried around a giant hammer twice her size. People thought it was cute. She died last summer. Enough to tolerate the collateral damage, yes. She did make such a mess of everywhere she fought. Inside wounds or out, it never seemed to matter. Sorry, guess that's just how it works, she'd say. Iona chuckles a bit wearily. But that's not what we remember her for. It was only a small inconvenience. Yes, once we started evacuating a 5-block radius around wounds she entered, Irita says. She's smiling as if at an old joke, but really doesn't sound like she's reminiscing. I can't help but think of what Roland said about her. Yes, Iona agrees. Some keepers require accommodations. Sometimes there are bumps before we learn how best to work with them. Aisling kicks my shoe in emphasis. Point taken, I say. But I'm not really here to make this about me. I'll figure my stuff out with Naive. On my time. Good, good. I'm sure she's grateful for your trust, Iona says. How did you know Shona, in that case? Long story. I don't really want to talk about it right now. Iona gives a single slow nod. As you like, she says, and turns back to the rest of the keepers. And that seems to be that. Following her lead, the others return to talking quietly about their memories of Shona. I don't get the sense that any of them were especially close with her, and I don't join in at all. Even if I weren't holding back the most important thing I have to say, it's not like I've got much to offer. I almost ate Shona's best friend. She got me a funny sweater. It seemed like we might be starting to get along. And then she died. Good story. Not that I think there's such a thing as a good story for a funeral. No matter when someone dies, there'll always be some wonderful thing they could have done or been part of, if their time hadn't been stolen from them. There'll always be stories about them that end with a sudden, senseless and then they died. And then they drowned beneath the earth, to linger alone for the rest of time. Eventually, one of the priests, his robes and mantle noticeably more ornate than the others, takes a stand at a podium. The soft, wordless music in the background trails off, which the others take as their cue to quiet down and let him speak. I don't know what I was expecting him to say, but when the service itself starts, all I can think of is how wrong it feels. I don't have any other funerals to compare it to, not that I've actually been to, but it just seems so normal. He talks a bit about the promise, about Shona's heroism, the hope she brought to the world, how grateful we all were to have had her, but there's so little about what it even is to be a keeper. Not the horror, not the terrible beauty, nothing at all of what it meant for us or her. Nothing someone who's really experienced magic could take the smallest bit of comfort in. It barely even feels real. None of this does. That's what they always say when someone dies before they're supposed to, but I never understood it until now. It doesn't, does it? Because it isn't. Isn't it funny? Isn't it pathetic? How everyone's talking about her like she's gone. I ignore her. I ignore everyone and everything in the room, withdrawing into my own bizarre, useless thoughts. They still feel like a more comfortable place to be than here. Until another voice shakes me out of myself. Sacrifice, someone spits. A woman with coiffed red hair and a tear-streaked face has stood up, gripping the pew in front of her with white knuckles. The head priest blinks rapidly, but quickly composes himself and gestures for her to join him at the altar. Mrs. Tiernan, this service is as much for you as anyone. Please, feel free to. I don't need your permission. Honora, please, the man beside her reaches out to take her hand. She immediately smacks his away. The ultimate sacrifice. That's what you call it when you force children to die for everyone else. Do you think it'll become something different if you bury it beneath enough of this old Clarish military honors garbage? She screams. Still sobbing, choking on the last word through her tears. Teth sputters out an incoherent sound. A second later, a great, awful tearing rings through the chamber. Behind us, Mary Hyland has brandished a box cutter and carved open a thin, dark hole in space. I turn just in time to see her rush through it. In their passing, the rest of the room is eerily still. I can't read the faces in front of me, all trained on Shona's mom, but Teth is visibly quivering, and Nilamai's wings have curled around her in an almost protective gesture. Roland's silky hair covers part of his face from this angle, looks like he's keeping it as perfectly together as ever, hands clenched in his lap. Irita's no different, silently drumming her fingers on her wheelchair's armrest. Finally, Maid barks out a dry, miserable laugh. What? Maid, what? Is there something you'd like to say? Mrs. Tiernan asks, her voice so tight I feel like I can hear it snapping in two. Mrs. Tiernan flinches back as if struck. Maid presses in on her, shoving Shona's dad aside when he tries to come between them. You, Mrs. Tiernan seethes. You said, you promised when you dragged Shona into this, you promised. You said whatever happened, you'd keep her safe. Aisling clenches her teeth. She clenches her teeth so hard it feels like I can hear it. The specter at my side looks like she's holding back hysterical laughter. Just tell them already, she hisses. Tell them they're mourning someone who's still alive. Shut up already, I snarl under my breath. Still suffering. Aisling puts a hand on my shoulder. Hey, this isn't, she mutters, trailing off into a whisper. Are you okay? You don't feel okay. Tell them you could save her if they stopped crying and fighting and gave you everything they have. Shut up. Liodane. Hey. Listen to me. I really don't think you should be here, Aisling insists. This is not your fault, not your problem to solve, we'll figure it out later, just come on. How could it not be? I'm the only one who knows what these people are talking about. How pointless everything they're saying is. How could I just leave and let them tear each other apart over nothing? See? Just like I said. And I wouldn't have had to protect her if you hadn't made her so miserable that she'd rather fight monsters forever than live with you. I shouldn't have had to. Maid howls, her voice breaking. No. You shouldn't have. Because you are a child. Mrs. Tiernan shrieks back. She flings an arm out, sweeping it over the gathered keepers and pointing an accusing finger at the priest. And what about you? What do you have to say for yourself? You steal children. She was just a girl, still just my baby, and you sent her off to fight to the death in this war that never ends. Why her? Why any of them? Why? Why? Suddenly, the room feels even colder. I shiver, but it does nothing to shake off the sensation of ice crystals forming in my veins. From the crowd of keepers, Iona Fianata stands. Mrs. Tiernan looks past Maid, turning to meet Iona's ice sculpture gaze. Her mouth hangs open in wordless terror as Iona approaches her. Other than her soft, even footsteps, the chamber is silent. Even my shadow can only stare up at her, dumbstruck. How many keepers has Iona watched die? How many friends, how many memories, how many dreams, how many lives is this woman dismissing as a bunch of stupid kids tricked into serving as child soldiers? Iona comes to a stop right across from Mrs. Tiernan, held apart only by the distance of the coral pew between them, regarding her with softly burning eyes. You're right, she says quietly. Beyond a doubt. Of course you are. She is. What? Mrs. Tiernan asks, stumbling over the word. A fallen hero. A sacrifice. A casualty. Those all mean the same thing, don't they? Someone we loved, taken from us in a way no one should be. Someone we could have saved if we'd only worked harder or taught them better. Someone all of us failed. Iona brushes a few half-frozen tears from her cheek, scattering a dusting of fresh snow into the air. I can't turn back time. I can't do more for your daughter than I did. I can't do anything to ease your pain or redress your loss. All I can say is that you're right, there is no justice or honor or glory in it. Only a call for us all to do better, which I should have heeded sooner. And for what little it is worth, I'm sorry. Mrs. Tiernan stares back at Iona in silence, quivering and squeezing her arms. And breaks down weeping. She almost falls forward, thumping her fist on Iona's shoulder with no impact, and cries and cries and cries while the mother of our city embraces her. Her husband stands beside her, rubbing her back. Even Maid has given her her space, retreating to cry quietly with her family. I am so sorry, Iona repeats. I know. Please trust me when I say that I know. No matter how much time we have, it's never enough. Never enough to say everything we want to say, do everything we want to do, but it should be. I hope beyond hope that one day, it will be. She already knows. She must. Even if Iona doesn't have access to all the scary magical secrets, which I doubt, she can't have lived almost a century as a keeper and never seen the signs. I'm not that special. So what is she doing about it? Could she help figure all this out? Or, more likely, is there anything I could do to help her? Things do calm down after that. Mr. Tiernan wrote and read the family's eulogy for Shona, which is probably for the best. Aisling, Irita, and Roland all have kind words for her. Maid doesn't seem up to speaking in public, which I can't at all blame her for. When the service ends, the head priest leads the small crowd out to the rocky seaside behind the chancel. The sea's a beautiful graveyard, if that's what it really is. If there are any graveyards, anywhere. The sun hasn't quite set, but it has dipped low in the sky, so here on the eastern shore, the shadows are long and the colors of sunset are just starting to creep over the horizon. Ahead, a long, narrow pier stretches out from the coast, with a white motorboat fastened to its far end. After a brief, quiet discussion between the priests, Shona's family, and Maids, the priests lead Shona's parents and Maids to the boat. The junior priestess unties it from the dock, then takes the helm and sets off, slowly, into the sun-dyed horizon. They don't travel too far out, though only enough to make for a safe distance from the shore. Once the boat comes to the stop, the head priest stands on its back platform, facing us, and recites, loud enough for us to hear clearly. Silent watcher beneath the waves, vessel of all earthly pains, we entreat you to carry your sister safely home. Guide her to her place of honored repose in her. There's an odd pause, but when I look around, it doesn't seem like most people think much of it. I only catch a few reactions. Iona is smiling to herself, like she's caught some very dry joke, while Roland and Irita glance her way with neutral expressions. In Clyasia's gardens, the priest finishes. He steps aside, beckoning Maid and Shona's family to the back of the boat. They step forward, Shona's mother in the center holding the urn, and slowly lower it into the sea together. It looks like an awkward job for three people, like her father and Maid are only moving to keep their hands on it. But eventually, they let it go, leaving it to bob along the water's surface. They step away, Shona's father leading her mother along as she bursts back into tears, and the boat speeds to the pier, moving notably quicker than it did on the way out. Almost immediately after the priestess finishes tying the boat to its dock, a low, doleful sound rings through the air. No, not through the air at all. It's like the cry of a whale echoing inside my head. In unison, the priests bow deeply to the sea. Shona's parents startle at the sound, huddling a little closer. Maid simply stands tall, fists balled at her side, and watches. A shadow slithers beneath the water, taller and wider than a skyscraper. Its entire shape ripples at its edges like cloth in the wind. The ocean ripples and rises and crashes into the rocks as something enormous surges up from its depths. But before it reaches the surface, it slows dramatically, leaving the sea almost as still as it was before it arrived. And when it does finally breach, its movements are slow and gentle as a thing of its size could be. It looks at first like a great undersea flower, or something clothed in them a column of pale white petals, each bearing patterns of blue bioluminescence that shine like star clouds in the dark water. Then, all as one, they contract into themselves, becoming something more like tentacles and offering us a clearer view of the beautiful creature hiding behind them. Na, the silent vessel. The messenger who never speaks, but shows himself to everyone. Beneath his countless fronds, he has the soft, round body of a sea slug, skin shiny and pearlescent and almost translucent, patterned just beneath the surface with its own lights and abstract shapes. Around his wide, dark whale's eyes orbs much bigger than me that still look tiny and beady. On his face is a thick cluster of fronds like the tentacles of a cuttlefish, which seem placed to hide his mouth shyly. Slowly, the petals on his back fan back out as if to feel the soft, cold breeze, or simply to show off the starlit displays dotted all across them. He glances over the shore, taking us in, his eyes lingering a bit longer on the group at the dock's end. Then, his gaze settles on Shona's urn, displaced far to one side by the waves of his arrival. Carefully, gently as can be, he reaches for it with his front tendrils, takes it, and cradles it, building it a little nest in his many-limbed grip. Holding it tightly, he turns away from us, dives back into the deep, and swims off toward the horizon. Any trace that he was ever here is gone within seconds, when the last waves hit the rocks. Now wanders the sea, peeking up from its depths to shock the occasional sailing crew, but he's seen most often on days like these. When we offer a dead keeper's remains to the ocean, he appears without fail to receive them. Whatever it means to return to the sea, it's much more literal for us. Except it's not, is it? Shona isn't in that urn. Nothing we'd even think of as part of her is. They didn't recover her body from getting eaten by a harbinger. So why? What about that little vessel is important enough for him to collect it and every other like it? Once Na leaves us behind, carrying whatever final token of Shona he took with him, most of the procession gathers by the dock. Iona sits down on the rocks with Shona's family, consoling them while they stare out and watch the sun's last traces fade. Maid eventually joins them. I just stand on my own, straining against the frozen weight of my body, and try to make sense of everything. It doesn't work. My shadow doesn't even have anything snide to say. I barely see her. Eventually, when night has almost fallen and the crowd starts to thin, Aisling breaks away and approaches alone. She greets me with a tiny nod, then turns, slowly, to watch night fall. "Hey," she says. "What are you thinking?" "Na's cute," I say. "Right, it's your first time at one of these." "He is." "And about your idea, with him in mind?" "Oh." I look around, making sure no one's in earshot. "I don't know. I mean, of course I knew about him, I just wasn't really thinking about him when I learned all this. And I can't think of any way it'd make sense for him to do this." "I was hoping you could. They didn't go find her body and put her ashes in there, did they?" "No. Even in cases where someone has killed the harbinger that got a keeper, they almost never find their remains in the wound. They usually just fill those with some of a keeper's favorite things. Tokens of them, you know." "Then I've got nothing," I admit. "Well, one more for the pile. All this aside, how are you managing? You look any progress on the donation plan?" I'd have a hard time thinking of how to ask enough random people to be worth it for something like that on my best days, and I haven't had any good days since everything last week. "Ah. Well, I obviously don't know the details of your medical situation, but if, for any reason, you absolutely needed to, could your power turn a bad day good?" My legs wobble as I look inward, feeling the chill in my veins, listening to the strangely dry, rustling sound where I once heard blood flowing through my ears. "Yes. But I'd have to eat people first. I've been empty for a while and it doesn't like that." "Of course." Aisling grits her teeth and exhales through them. "So. Do you have any estimate of the minimum viable amount of people eating you'd have to do to fix that? Just making sure I understand where we stand, if you or we have an emergency." "Not really. After the first few times, I started looking for big groups and taking tiny bites from every healthy person in them." "Well. I'm sure you can see now how it might help to keep logs of these things. Does it really work that way?" "It doesn't feel like it does. I've never had a concrete sense of how much stolen health I'm holding or how much it takes to do any given thing with it. The closest I've come to thinking of it in amounts is that there is a smallest possible sip I can take from someone which is more than enough to hurt them and how quickly whatever I'm doing is burning through my remaining supply. Lots of things don't feel the way they are, and you won't know how it works if you never even try to quantify it. And not to pile more stuff on you, but it'd probably also help if you could find a specialist in keeper health issues. The experts will know way more about what's going on with you than I do. I do already have one of those. They brought her in right before we met, so I haven't asked her about the feather thing yet, but maybe soon." "Oh. Good, then. Who was it?" Aisling asks. "My doctor." "Why?" Aisling shrugs. "Just wondering if they're anyone I've heard of. Medicine's not one of my big things, but I have looked into the field. Her name's Dr. Cantillon. I don't know if you'd like her, she." "Ava Cantillon is your doctor?" Aisling almost shouts. She's looking at me the way Shona might have if I'd talked about having lunch with Irita. Do you know her?" "Only by her work, but her papers on modern presentations of the Third Scourge are incredible. One of the first things I read about intersections of magic and the material world that made its subject look like something it might at least be possible to understand and systematize. Do you think you could get her autograph? Probably. Or I could make you a squiggle that'd look just like it. She's got the most doctor handwriting ever. I smiled despite myself. She's right, with a catch. I used to. It was Tara. Aisling purses her lips, holding back an expression. Ah, she says, and nothing more. Right, has she been around long enough to know Tara? To have her own awful experiences with her? Does she think I'm some gross serial killer fangirl now? I can never miss a chance to mess something up. Yes, though, I'm sure that won't be a problem. I'll tell Dr. Cantillon she has keeper fans, I say. Appreciate it. And you know, about the volunteer thing, if you aren't sure where to start, there's a lot of people right over there who I'm certain could help. What? I glance back at the dock. Irita and Nilamai have left, but the priests, the Fianatas, and Roland all sit on the shore, gathered around Maid and Shona's family, talking quietly amongst themselves. Shona's mother is still visibly crying, but even she's part of their conversation. Now. I can't. They're doing funeral stuff. Plus that's two of the people who'll least want to help me and one of their mom. One of those people just offered you a clean slate, and meant it, yes. And whatever you think about him, he's an expert in PR bullshit. Wait. Seriously? You're serious? Why does it even matter to you? Aisling puts a hand to her temple. Deadly serious. And because I am trying to help you. If you end up in trouble again, or we find Isabel's harbinger, I don't want you out of commission because you didn't take what might be very simple steps to get you the resources you need, and it'd be very easy to take those steps right now. Oh, I say. Right. That makes sense. Aisling pulls her phone from a coat pocket and starts tapping away. Here. If you don't want to interrupt their conversation, I can call him over right now. He answers keeper messages pretty much instantly unless he's in a wound or something. Set against his brilliant smile just a few hours ago, Roland's voice echoes through my head, I'll kill you. You're going to die alone. It doesn't make sense. Nothing about him makes sense. How could I trust him with anything when I don't understand him at all? How can Aisling trust me? How could Shona, who barely even had anything to gain from it? Go ahead, I say. Great. Sent. Aisling taps a single key and puts her phone down. Sure enough, maybe a minute later, Roland stands up, approaches us, and raises a hand. Yo, he says with an inviting smile. Is this no longer off limits? Obviously. I'd say you don't need to gloat, but I'm not sure if that's true, Aisling says. Roland's smile widens a little, but he says nothing. We thought you might be able to help sort out the logistics of something. I don't know exactly what you two talked about the last time you met. Are you aware of the donor plan to fill Lyodane's particular magical needs? Oh yeah. Roland says, eyes narrowing. You mentioned it back then. And I told you how easy it'd be to get it going with my help. Yes, you did, I say. But why'd you have to be so weird and pushy and creepy about it? Roland takes a single step closer. I suppress a flinch. Reflexively, I want to pull back, but it doesn't feel quite like he's pressing in on me, and the way I am now, I'm never sure how close people need to be to even hear me talk. Why'd you tell me there was no way we could talk to Naiv when she told me the morning after she would have answered her phone whenever? I ask. You apparently met Naiv, then continued doing what you were doing for more than another week, Roland answers immediately. If I left you for her to handle, how was I supposed to know you wouldn't go off and keep doing it until she got back? That doesn't make any sense. If that was my plan, what's the exit strategy? It'd just be digging a slightly deeper hole that'd cave in around me the next time you two talked. Aisling squints at me, very pointedly. Roland's smile returns, wry but thoughtful as he glances off into the ocean. You know, when I found you, I really didn't know enough about you to say just what I thought you'd do. His red eyes dart back to mine. Now, though? Yeah. Sounds about right, he says. Fine, yes. I've had a lot of stupid plans. I say nothing. Look, this is not really the point, Aisling says. Roland, whatever your thought processes and the information you had access to at the time, I'm confident you were mistaken about Lyodane's intentions, both before and after your encounter. I also don't see what any of us have to gain from relitigating this. So, given that we seem to have moved past it to something resembling everyone's satisfaction, are you willing and able to help now? Oh, sure, I'd be happy to help. What can I do for you? Roland asks, looking my way even while Aisling speaks. I want to arrange some kind of event where people can donate health to my pool in exchange for, I don't know, autographs or something. It doesn't sound like a very good deal when I say it like that, but Aisling says people will do it. I just don't really know where to start, and I haven't been able to figure it out because everything hurts. Roland nods eagerly. That's no trouble at all, yeah. I can set you up with my agent. Nice lady, great at her job. She'd at least want you on Flow or Lighthouse to make the arrangements, but either of us could verify you as a keeper right now. I sigh. I was afraid of that. Okay. That's fine. As for the, or something, Roland taps a finger on his chin. After a few seconds, his ruby eyes light up. Got it. You do tarot, right? He asks. I tilt my head and narrow my eyes. Where'd that come from? Thought your cards looked familiar. Not really my thing, but some of that old occult stuff comes up in training seminars. Oh. I guess it would. Yes, I do. That's perfect, then. Offer people selfies or autographs for a little bit of juice, tell their fortunes for a little bit more. Tarot isn't, never mind, that's actually a good idea, I say. What were you expecting? He asks, holding up his arms as he shrugs. I don't know. Some sort of plot to make me your sidekick, maybe. Roland leans forward with his arms folded behind his back, bringing his face close to mine. The motion is so sudden my heart leaps out of my chest like a startled cat, but the rest of me freezes in place. Well, if you're offering, he murmurs, his voice slightly warm on my cheek. Just like that, all my thoughts scatter, blown away on a passing wind. I cast my eyes downwards. I can't think clearly when I look at him. He's too bright. As obnoxious as he is, I can't even begin to deny that he just looks unbelievable. Like a photo of a supermodel in motion. But he's right there. He's so close. I don't know what'll happen next, but maybe it won't be bad. I get what Maid meant now when she mentioned wondering why she even bothered every time she looked in the mirror after meeting Roland. Tall, slender in his robes, with a sharp-featured face that could as easily belong to a handsome girl as a beautiful boy, all framed by long hair that flows out like strands of golden silk and those big, red eyes of his. I glimpse upwards into them and a memory stabs sweetly through me like a jagged shard of glass. The image of a single crimson eye, its frenzied glare peeking out between sullied golden curtains. A burning desire to tear me apart piercing through the night as every bit of breath is crushed out of my chest. But I don't understand. I'm terrified, but it's a fear twined together with what? He pulls back and the world snaps back into place around me. He chuckles to himself. I blink. Nah, I don't have to be there. Especially not if you show everyone a face as cute as the one you're wearing right now, he grins teasingly. I point to my face. I am wearing a mask, I say tonelessly. Oh, your eyes are enough to tell. I grab the forearm of my cane hand, folding my free arm over myself protectively. Roland, are you quite done? Aisling asks, voice sharp, arms folded. We do have work to do. I was just coming back to that. Anyway, I don't have to be part of it at all, really. You'll get more of a crowd if I am, but hey, up to you. If you want your debut to be your own thing, I can respect that. Irita tried something like that on me when I was getting started. I'd feel better that way, yes. Thanks. I can't stop wondering why he's being so helpful all of a sudden, but I also can't bring myself to ask. I feel like I already know what he'd say, but also like I wouldn't understand him any better for having heard it from him. And I'm sorry, I say instead. For making everything so much harder than it needs to be. I know what I was doing, I get that you had your reasons to see me how you did, and I'm not sure why you'd bother helping me now, but I don't know. Thanks. I'm glad we didn't just kill each other. Aisling shoots me an odd sidelong look. Roland only blinks. The sound of dark waves breaking on the rocks fills the silence between us. Finally. Yeah. Me too, Roland says blithely. Is this flirting? Is this what that looks like? My shadow asks, regarding me like mud on her boots. Bizarre. Disgusting. One more thing you'll never miss when you shed this flesh like snakeskin. Is it? Now. Why? It can't be. It better not be. That'd make even less sense than everything else about him. That can't be all it takes to win you over, can it? She growls, some creepy pushy words and a favor he told you was trivial. Just shut up. You're not helping. I'm not dealing with you right now. It takes a few more days of quiet misery for Roland's church-furnished publicist, a lady from Alelsia whose name, Ethelflaed, I'm glad I don't have to pronounce, to schedule the event. She obliges when I ask to make all the plans through Lighthouse Messages, ask some questions about how my power works, what exactly I need from volunteers. My answers aren't as detailed as either of us would like, and the level of exposure I'd be comfortable with, as little as possible. Taking all that into account, Ethelflaed arranges a simple meet and greet at a small chancel in the Weald, with the obvious twist that while she can't stop anyone who just wants to look at the weird new keeper from showing up, the main event will be a spot where people can line up to offer me their health. The smallest sip I can take will get them a picture and a shaky autograph. A slightly bigger one adds a 3-card tarot reading, where I have veto power over the subject if I don't think it's a question tarot could help with or someone just asks me something stupid. I'm sure she found a more diplomatic way to phrase that. By Sunday, everything's been set up and she's spread the word around on whichever platforms people get their keeper news from. Wary as I was of getting their attention, these church people do work shockingly fast. I don't read any announcements about the event. I'm sure I'd find whatever they say about me embarrassing. All I do is show up when I'm supposed to, torn inside between my urgent need for more life and hoping I won't be the center of some huge horrible crowd. As it turns out, it's not too bad. The chancel is a modestly sized circle of ceramic white and blue glass, and it looks like most of the people coming must already be inside. Out front, there's only a woman in simple priestly robes, who leads me in through the sanctuary's back entrance. I transform before I head in, not interested in putting on any more of a show than I already am. Voices raise as I step inside, not shouting for my attention but speaking among themselves. There's somewhere between 30 and 40 people here. Of those, most of them, maybe 25, have joined a line that winds around the chamber's edges, while the rest are simply standing around. Some raise their phones to take my picture. The line has formed up around a booth in the corner closest to us, where there's a long table covered in black cloth and draped with dark curtains on either side. I don't suppose I gave them much to work with as far as my aesthetic. The priestess escorts me there, past the small crowd. I've never done anything like this before. Is there any way I'm supposed to start? I ask, then sit down and set my cane against the table. This seat is surprisingly soft, at least. That's up to you. Is there anything you'd like to say? I tap my throat once. Even if there was, they couldn't hear me like this. I have a voice thing. Emergence. Ah. Well, I'm sure that's fine, she says with a small nod. Just do whatever feels natural. All these people are here to help you, after all, and we have volunteers on hand to care for them afterwards. If it's necessary. She gestures across the room to a nurse's station with a spread of snacks and drinks, which makes the whole thing feel more like a particularly fancy blood drive than anything else. All right. I'll figure something out, then. Thank you. I guess tell them I said so too. The priestess nods and steps away, leaving me alone at the table. People at the front of the line crane around each other to look at me, while others reposition to take more pictures. This is fine. This'll be fine. I only need to deal with one person at a time. Doing my best to ignore the observers, I unceremoniously wave the first person in line forward. To my surprise, I dimly recognize her, a girl with thick glasses and her red hair in a spiky bun, though she's wearing a long spring dress instead of the school uniform I last saw her in. More, was it? Hi. Oh, cool, it is you. And you remembered. She sits across from me and cranes almost halfway over the table, probably to hear me better. It hasn't been that long. And I don't meet that many people. More shrugs. Yeah, I guess not. Thank you for coming, in any case. How'd you know it was me? It's starting to seem like basically everyone knew me way before I thought of doing this. I mean, people talk, yeah. Especially Shona. You two were friends, right? She talked like you were, only sort of half-assedly anonymizing stuff about you. You know how she is with secrets. Or well. I'm sorry about her, she says, lowering her voice. I didn't know her that well, but the whole school's yeah. I don't want to talk about Shona, I say flatly. Oh. Sure. Sorry, she mutters, looking a little taken aback. Anyway, are you sure this'll be okay? I don't know a lot of things about how this works, really. It'll hurt, and I'm not sure how much or for how long. Seriously? The specter seated on the table's edge shoots me an incredulous glare. She has a point. Why should I get cold feet now of all times? Why should inflicting myself on a normal girl around my age living her normal life feel any different from what I was doing before? There's no way she's even the first kid I've hurt. I wasn't sorting my victims by age, or by anything. I almost never saw them at all. Moore shakes her head, smiling. It's fine. Happy to help, and I don't really care about missing school or anything like that. I'll have people around, books to catch up on, stuff to think about. I don't mention the days where I'm in too much pain to focus on anything. I'm not trying to scare her away, I don't know what I'm doing. All right. I think it'd be best if I do things for you before I take what I need. So, what are you here for? I think I'd like a reading. If I'm going to be sick anyway, getting a little more sick seems like a fair price to see the future. I point to the bottom of the sign on my table. Tarot is not magic. No one can see the future. All I know about you is what you tell me, the last line says. That part's there at my insistence. It may not be exactly true, but I expect my magic readings would be just as awful for everyone else, and I'm not using these people as guinea pigs to find out. Maybe if another keeper volunteers, I'll tell Aisling to add it to whatever experiments on my power she's thinking up. Well yeah, I know that. I read a bit about it before I came. Too much to hope that it'd work differently if a keeper does it, huh? Yes, I say. Do you still want it? Yeah, that's fine. So I pull an ordinary deck from my keeper pockets, have more piles shuffle it, and get started. It's the first reading I've done for someone other than myself in a while, since I've either been too busy or too imposing for my 7th floor corner to get many visitors, and it pretty quickly leaves my comfort zone. She asks me some fairly specific questions about a crush she has and what to do about it. She's not trying to divine someone's private details or anything stupid like that, which at least one girl did try when I was still in school, but her situation sounds complicated enough that I don't really understand it. I just explain the cards and let her do the talking about what she thinks they mean. Eventually, she decides more or less on her own that the girl she likes isn't in a place where that sort of thing would be good for her, even if she did reciprocate. I mean, I pretty much knew all of this, being honest with myself. But it helps to unpack it all and sort it out, you know. More sighs. Her shoulders droop a little. That's the point. That's what tarot's actually good for, I say. Sorry it wasn't a nicer answer. Better right than nice. Thanks for listening. Listening was all I could really do, so I'm glad it seems to have been worth something to her. More steps around the table and poses while she takes a picture of us. I sign her journal and 3 more books she pulls from a big messenger bag, and not that I really have a signature, or practiced for this at all, or could have made my hands cooperate for long enough to practice even if I'd wanted to. Still, she seems happy enough with my shaky scrawls. Thanks, she says as she tucks her books away. So, how's the next part work, exactly? You probably want to sit back down, I say. She does, balling her fists and steeling herself like she's about to have blood drawn. If only it were that easy. Without another word so long I've already waited too long. I let my famished soul reach out, taking her life in its many-fanged grip. More winces at the sensation, face paling. The whole world smells of warm rain and fresh growth. I grin behind my mask, open my maws, and drink, draining first 1 gulp of essence, then a second. It takes all my will to pull away with only those drops. The suffering written clearly on Moore's face helps. She's trembling, eyes wrenched shut, whimpering and biting her lip hard enough to draw a trickle of blood. And that was nothing. That's what carrying the barest fraction of your burden will do to a person. Try to breathe the way you normally do. It won't help much, but it'll do something, I say. Moore nods, but very obviously doesn't do that. She stands slowly, almost tripping over her own legs, and holds herself up on her chair, doing her best to smile through the pain, until a nurse rushes over to help her across the room. Watching her limp away, I understand why I hesitated. The reality of what I've done was never the point. Without the threat of immediate death on the line, it's just hard to take a bite out of someone sitting right in front of me, someone whose name and face I know. It's simpler, easier, less raw and less real to sense an abstract wisp of life in the distance, know at a glance that it belongs to someone who's never suffered the way I do every day, and take just a little bit of the good fortune I should have been born with for myself. But I wouldn't be here if feeling bad was enough to keep me from doing anything. And on it goes. A few people leave the line after seeing my first victim, but only a few. And slowly, like the roots of a parched plant drinking the first rain in weeks, life trickles into my empty well, easing the agony that's gnawed at me ceaselessly since I wasted everything I had fighting Roland. It's more like a too brief shower or a trickle from a watering can than true rain, though. Compared to the reserves I used to have, I can already tell that these gifts are only droplets. As long as I'm relying on donations like these, I'll never reach the heights I did in Alunla's wound again. But that's okay. It'll have to be. Pushing myself that hard was a miserable experience, and more importantly, I don't need to do it. I can already do more than I could then. I just need to make better plans that use the things I'm good at. Maybe there'll be another harbinger I can drain the way I did Alunla. Or maybe it'll turn out that I can just hide in an alley and feed my target's cursed copies of myself until it withers and dies. At Ashling's urging, I have tested the range I can control my clones from and found it to be pretty far, but I obviously have no way to tell how they'll interact with wounds until I find one. The shadow at my side leans over the table, filling the corner of my vision, and fixes me with a grim, knowing smirk. What? What are you so smug about? We haven't even tried yet. You don't know how it'll work any more than I do. Of course I don't say any of that, but the boy next in line is still giving me a weird look. He scuttles off when I scowl up at him, so thanks for that. Hope you're happy. If you want me to stop holding back and eat everyone, you picked the worst possible time to bother me. I'm exhausted by the end of the event, but physically, I do feel better than I have in a while. A thin trickle of life is enough to keep my veins from freezing and my body from screaming out in constant crippling pain. I don't even have to feel bad about using it for enough everyday relief to keep myself standing, since all of it came from people who offered it to me freely. Part of me wants to walk home, just because I can, but that would feel like an extravagance. As part of this event, my donors were all offered treatment at Guiding Light, the hospital that deals with esoteric injuries when they don't quite merit a stay in the sanctuary. By the time I need more, there should be doctors with at least some idea of what I'm doing to people and whether any of my harm is lasting. I should make this much work until then, or at least for as long as I can. So I take the bus home. It's good practice ignoring the way people look at me now. When the elevator opens on the 7th floor, the front desk nurse smiles at me. "Welcome back, Lyodane. You have a visitor. I told him he could wait for you in the great room. Don't worry, though, you haven't kept him waiting too long." "What? Who?" I ask, gripping the desk's edge and leaning over it. The only he I can think of is Roland. He could have tracked me down or followed me home or gotten my info from his publicist or something. I still don't know that he's plotting something weird, but even if he isn't, I'm not letting my hospital become a meeting room for every keeper who wants to bother me. The nurse looks a little unsettled. I'm sure she knows what it could mean when strange things startle me, but relaxes after a moment. "There's nothing to worry about, dear. It's just your dad stopping in. It's been a bit since he's made it here, hasn't it?" "Oh, I say. He actually came here. Now he's decided to remember I exist. I think that might be worse." Behind her matted, ink-stained hair, my shadow stares at me with a confusing blend of disbelief and disgust and fear. Something I've never seen or imagined seeing from her, but that's the only way I can read her face. I'm about to ask the nurse if she can get rid of him, or just turn around and leave, when she points and waves. "There you are. She's back, Mr. Shield," she calls. Dad stands at the end of the hall. A big bag from a bookstore slips from his fingers, thudding to the floor. His hair's gotten long and scraggly since I last saw him, the pale stubble on his chin is thick, and his eyes are wide and wet behind his glasses. "Hey, Leah." His voice breaks as he says my name. Dad stares down the hall at me, smiling, eyes heavy with stifled tears. I'm really sorry it took so long to check in on you. There was just a lot of it doesn't matter why. I should have tried harder," he says. Why? 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 My voice hisses into my ear, over and over and over. "Anyway, how've you been?" He scoops up his fallen bag and glances over me, forcing a grin. "You look, good. I like the new look. It's cool." Is that weird to say? Can't be cool if I'm saying it, right? Hope that doesn't ruin anything for you, but I do really think. "What are you doing here?" I ask. My voice is too quiet to really cut him off or speak over him, but after a second, he does trail off. Dad glances off to the side, staring at the floor. After a moment, he comes a little closer, his expression resolving into a pained half-smile. "Yeah, I guess I should have called first, shouldn't I? Hope I'm not interrupting any plans, It's been 2 months. We've talked as many times. Why am I only worth your time now?" I do my best to snarl. He stops in his tracks, wincing as if I'd hit him. We stand there, frozen while the world keeps moving around us. My shadow seethes to my side, draping herself around my shoulder. "You could eat him," she whispers. "You could tear him up and feed him to someone who matters, someone who shut up. Could you quit wasting both our time spewing insane garbage you know no one would ever do? Why not? If he only wants to be part of your life now, he literally can." "Lyodane." A shaky hand touches my arm. "Is everything all right?" Noiren's voice asks. Hi. I'm her dad. We're fine. It's just been a while, Dad mutters. Noiren's eyes flicker in his direction, but quickly return to me. I'm okay, I lie. I see. It's nice to finally meet you, Mr. Shield. I'll leave you both to it, Noiren says. She's smiling politely as ever, but her voice sounds a little chilly to me. She raises a shaky hand and shuffles back to her seat. She seems nice, Dad says meekly. Glad to see you've made some new friends here. She is, I say, quieter than before. Noiren looks awful. Where did she even come from? When her useless body fails her for the last time, will her light feet be the last thing to go, or will she hold on to them until her soul loses its grip on its shell and goes off to suffer wherever souls that aren't important enough for Nago? Leah, listen, I really am sorry. I should have said something before I just showed up, and I should have been here a lot sooner. I know all that. Could we just talk about it, just for a bit? Maybe somewhere a little less busy? Glancing around, it doesn't seem like we've quite made a scene in the front hall. Noiren is still watching Dad with a look I can only imagine as disguised suspicion, and the nurse who waved him over is clearly taken aback by all this. Fine. I step around him, keeping my eyes to the ground, and lead the way back to my room. While Dad looks around uncertainly and my shadow glares at him, I scoot Pearl's nest aside, raise the back of my bed, and settle into it. Dad breaks eye contact, glancing at the wall with a guilty smile. I saw your ad, he says. I pick up a pillow, give it a violent squeeze, and groan. What made it my ad? I told them not to use pictures. I didn't give them any pictures. Dad only smiles at that. Yeah, well, when I heard there was a local keeper called Ill-Wind Lyodane, then read that she was looking for health donations and doing tarot for donors. Sierra was always the smart one, but even I can put a three-piece puzzle together. Ugh. Right. I should have seen this coming. Should have kept using the fake name. I was just so sick of tripping over my own stupid, pointless secrets. Don't use that title, I hate it. Sure. Sorry, Dad says. He frowns, scrunching up his brow in thought. What? I ask. If you don't like it, why don't you just change it? Having a hard time coming up with a better one? I can't, because I didn't pick it. It's written on my soul. I slump forward, stopping just short of burying my face in my pillow. No, I understand that, but your presence doesn't have to define who you are or what you go by any more than, well, maybe a little more than your face. Still, he says. I can't remember the last time there was this much energy in his voice. It's weird. I sit about halfway up and look his way. Can you do that? Wait, how do you even know what I'm talking about? Sure. I don't keep up with Keeper news as much as I used to, but I was, well, that's what I was into at your age. I know at least how the basics work. He gives me that sad half-smile again. So I know that there are no rules about what a keeper calls themselves, and that precedent's on your side. Do you know Tankra? Star-shattering song. From the war. Yeah. The first Riemann keeper to publicly turn against the war. He went through 3 titles, one he didn't like, one he chose to replace it, and finally that one, which came from Emergence, not quite based on either of the other 2. So you could just as well grow into one you're happier with, but until you do, no one would stop you from going by something else. Oh. I never thought of that, I admit. I probably just assumed there was nothing for it, like everything else I hate about my magic, and moved on. Wish I had before I started doing things in public. You've done one thing in public, right? Shouldn't be too late to change your mind. I guess so. Changing my name immediately after I announced myself to the world might make me look like kind of an idiot, but it's a little late for that. Dad shuffles in place uncomfortably. I huddle into my pillow, watching him through the corner of my eye. You could have said something sooner, he finally says. His voice is gentle, but unsteady. Why does everyone say that like it's just the easiest thing in the world? I mean, it's good news, isn't it? We finally have something to celebrate. I can't help it. I collapse into my pillow and laugh and choke and laugh. Leah. Slow, heavy footsteps cross the room. It is good news. Right? Dad sets a hand on my shoulder gingerly, barely there, like he's testing something that might burn his hand off. I can't find the energy to shove him away. I still don't know. I mean, it probably didn't make anything worse that wasn't terrible before, I think. Unless you count making a friend just in time for her to get eaten last week, or the idea that I'm turning into a story about dying forever and clinging to the edge of the void with scraps of vigor stolen from everyone else, or what it means for that story that death isn't even a thing that's real, or whether all this power will even help if I ever end up in the place I've always been hurtling toward, trapped forever in the void beyond life with a soul full of passengers who never shut up. Never mind, I mutter. Not getting into that. I shake myself out of my thoughts before I look up at him, scowling. Honestly, I still don't understand why you're here. Dad flinches again. I mean, if it's not, that's okay too. I know it's something really big you're going through, good or bad or both, and I wanted to be there for it. For you, he says. His shoulders sag as he speaks, like even he can immediately see how it sounds. If I needed someone to be there for me, why would I tell you? I snap. When was the last time you were there for, I don't know, anything real? Dad grits his teeth. If this is about the time I forgot to pick you up, I'm still really sorry, but you know what it's about. Quit acting like it's just one mistake you can fix right up. Blood rushes to my head in a numbing, chilling current. Something in me wants to flare, to reach out and wrap him in myself and drown him in my frozen feelings. I do my best to bite that impulse down. It's every time I could have been dead and you left me alone in some recovery room for days. I wasn't worth your time or trouble or pain, so you ignored me just like everyone else. That isn't Leah, that's not why. Dad draws back into the door, opening and closing his mouth soundlessly. What did you need me for? What could I have done to help? He pleads. You never even seemed to need anything I could do, so. You never asked. You just left. And now you think, what, did you think I'd forget all that as soon as you heard I mattered now and decided to stroll back into my life? That's really not. Dad goes silent. He slumps against the wall, looking listlessly down at the floor. Never mind. You're right. It doesn't really matter why I did any of that. It was wrong. It wasn't fair to you. And I'm sorry. He pauses for only a moment, his brow furrowed as if he had glanced down to see a knife in his gut. But it's only a moment before he blinks and swallows the expression back down. So sorry. Dragging himself upright, Dad puts his bag down on my desk, moves my chair to the foot of my bed, and sits there, meeting my gaze with wet eyes. I did see your event before it happened. I just, thought it might be embarrassing for you if I showed up there all of a sudden. I wasn't exactly counting on your support. What's your point? Yeah, I'm sure you were real surprised not to see me around, he says with a weak chuckle. I'm only bringing it up because listen, for all the stuff Sierra and I were into when we were kids, I can't really know what it's like for you. Of course I'd like to, however much you want to share, though I might have pretty much used up my good dadly advice about your situation with the title thing. But I really do want to help however I can. So, he straightens his back and takes a deep breath, the way I do when my doctors are about to stick me with something. If you need other people's health to do your new job, or just to be okay, you can use mine if you need it, alright? Feels like the least I can do after everything. My shadow cackles with delight. No, I say. She shoots me a withering look. A strange mix of relief and confusion washes over Dad's face. You sure? I mean, not that I was looking forward to it or anything, but I'm serious, if it'd help you. No. There's not some one magic thing you can do to make this okay. And then even if I needed that, or wanted your help, you think it isn't hard enough having to hurt random strangers I'll never see again? Dad looks away. He puts a hand to his chin, clenching his teeth. Finally, he nods thoughtfully, smiling faintly through a steady trickle of tears. Yeah. That's fair, he says. After another long stretch of uneasy silence, he stands up. I brought you some things. And hey, they aren't even really from me, so if you don't want anything to do with me, I just hope they do more for you than I have. He takes a big stack of books out of his bag and sets them on my desk. I squint, glancing over their spines. Parenting After the Promise, I say flatly. Not that one. That one's mine. He stuffs it back into the bag in a rush, as if I'd caught him with something embarrassing. The rest are the good stuff. Before we get into that, I should tell you I'm technically not sure if I'm supposed to have them, so, you know, this can be our little secret, okay? Or if it can't, just use that keeper prerogative to look out for your old dad, he says with a nervous laugh. Supposed to? Why not? They're just books. They were your mom's, he says quietly, as if that explains anything. Okay. Did she have a secret shelf for books on astrology or something? And no, Dad says. But he pauses for a moment, frowning with uncertainty. Well, no, I don't think so. You're on the right track, though. You know she studied magic, right? MHM. Mom was some kind of academic who worked for the church. Dad always had a hard time talking about her in too much depth, and I never really cared enough to push him, but there's only so many things that can mean. I don't think I've ever told you just how into it she was. See, when you make it in some of those fields, you come to a point where things get weird. Weird enough that they don't want the experts sharing everything they know in public. Maybe some of what they're working on would scare us normal people, or maybe it somehow wouldn't be safe to know at all if you come at it with the wrong mindset. I don't know if you've run into any of that yet, but I'm sure you get where I'm going. I nod. I probably knew something like this even before I started seeing what it means to die. Ashlinks talk about infohazards. Dr. Cantillon's warning to Dr. Hines that he simply couldn't be a normal doctor anymore if he knew the things she did. Basically, if the people in the know like what you're doing, they'll offer to read you in and share their work with you, long as you agree to keep all the secrets. Sierra made it there pretty quickly. I don't think she was even supposed to talk to me about what she was doing after that, but, well, here we are. We always talked about everything. Dad drifts off for a bit, visibly lost in thought, before he looks back at the books. These are some workbooks she brought home. Not sure if she was really supposed to take them out and leave them around, but, well, no one's ever come looking for them. He gives the pile a few firm pats, and I stand, scooting past him to take a closer look. It's a tall stack of thick hardbacks. The only cover I can see is almost completely unadorned, just a title on a dark background, On the Violability of the Soul. The titles on their spines are all embossed in a similar style, and they alternate between ominously clinical and vaguely poetic, The Eggs in the Sky. The Fading, Human Mortality Before the Fourth Scourge. Channeling Our Nightmares. Everlasting Ribbons. What are these? I ask. I mean, what are they about? Her specialty was things that you can't do with magic, as far as we know, the big no-go zones like precognition, but smaller, stranger exceptions too. She wanted to know why they were out of bounds and if there were ways to push at those boundaries, things we just couldn't do yet because we haven't figured out how. Honestly, though, I didn't understand most of the stuff in here. Take that one on top. I think it was about mind control. How it's impossible but also it happens all the time. Didn't get it at all. The same way you can die and still suffer forever, if I had to guess. Magic seems to like making strict definitions of anything into incoherent soup. Well, guess that's why Sierra was in the secret club and I'm in C security. He scratches the back of his head, smiling sheepishly. Then he reaches into the bag, pulls out a small stack of unmarked black notebooks with a few sheaves of printed paper tucked between them, and sets them next to the pile. Oh, there's some of her journals, too. Dad drifts off for a bit, visibly lost in thought. Some of them are in some kind of shorthand or cipher, and I can't help you too much with those, but well, you're a smart girl. You'll figure it all out. Maybe. If I can't, I do have a friend who's good at this sort of thing. Thank you, for these. I doubt I'll open these books up and stumble into the answers to all my problems, but they do sound like the sort of thing that might at least connect to my big horrible questions. Don't mention it. I just thought it'd be something nice for you to have. Thought you'd get more out of this stuff than I did. Dad wipes his eyes and smiles to himself. You remind me so much of her, you know. I did see Mom not too long ago, in the closest thing to the flesh I ever will. It was just a monster trying to bludgeon me with memories I barely even have, but it was plenty to really see the resemblance. Less so now than then. I glance down at the shimmery gray veins on the back of my hand. It's not just seeing her in you. It's so many of the things you like. Most of your favorite books growing up came from her collection, you know. And the way you took to so much of her old occult stuff. And how much you hate letting anyone think there's anything wrong with you. You would have liked her. Plus she knew enough that she'd have something helpful to say right now. She would have handled all this much better than I did. How do you know? You barely even tried, I say. Yeah. I should have done more, I know. I should have done everything I could have. I couldn't. He trails off, blinking rapidly. It was like watching her die again, he almost whispers. Sorry, I know how it sounds. But that's why. I don't say anything. I don't have anything to say. I don't understand love. I've never had anyone or anything that matters more to me than myself. But if I did, and I lost them, and all I had left of them was some distorted echo wasting away just like they did, I don't think I'd do any better than he has. She would have been so proud of you, he says, shutting his shimmering eyes as he smiles a little wider. What? Why? What have I ever done but scare people away and hurt people to feed myself and kill monsters who might not even deserve it any more than I do? And even if she would, what do I care? I never knew her. She's dead. Or she's whatever passes for dead, I don't know. In the sea, if that's where normal people go. Is it? Could she be haunting us right now? Would it change anything if she was? I obviously don't say any of that. I just ask, would she? Yeah. I'm sure of it, he insists. You know, we were both a little down when we left the Promise Range, but I don't know if Sierra exactly wanted to be a keeper. I think what she always wanted was to be one of those characters in her books who could change the world just with what they know. The wise old mages delving through their libraries for the secrets of the universe. That series about the girl who discovered magic in a world where it was hidden from everyone was her favorite. But in the real world, learning can only ever get you so far, right? She'd have been so happy to see you going places we never could. To teach you everything she knew until she started learning from you firsthand. She'd have loved being your mom. He chokes on the last words. I'm sorry you're stuck with me instead, he says, and with a blink, the tears he's been struggling to hold back start to pour out. But I still don't believe him. I think he believes what he's saying, and I don't think he's saying anything wrong or making anything worse. It's just that. If Mom and I were really so alike, and she really loved magic enough to make it her life without ever being able to use it. If I knew someone who was exactly like me, only she had something I wanted more than anything and couldn't have. I'd hate her. I'd hate her so much. Sitting in my hospital bed and hearing about her living the life I'd never have would be torture. All I'd want to do with her is steal that missing thing for myself. And if I couldn't? Tear her open. Crawl into her heart. Sew yourself in and do your best to forget that you were ever anyone else. Live happily there until you find the next thing that isn't enough. It doesn't really matter, though, does it? She's gone, at least in every way that counts, and Dad's still here. He isn't a great dad, but I'm not a great anything, and he's here. Maybe that's worth a little more than nothing. I draw a tiny breath of life to steady myself, set my cane down, and hug him, leaning into his chest while he sobs.